What's up, everybody? I'm Maureen, and we're back with another sew along this week for McCall's. We're going to be making McCall's 8475 View B. So go ahead, grab your fabric and your sewing tools, and let's go ahead and get started on this dress. I'll see you on the other side. So the first thing you're going to do is take pattern piece number 9 and stay stitch between the notches on either side. Then you're going to take pattern piece number 10 and you are going to pin this to each side, matching up your notches and your edges. So I did use extra pins here, and you may have to clip in additional notches to make it all fit. But again, we're going to take this to our sewing machine and sew it at 5/8 of an inch seam allowance on each side. All right, so make sure you have pressed those seams open on both sides. And now we're going to move on to attaching pattern piece number 12. And there should be a single notch that you see. You're going to match up the single notch that's on this pattern piece here. All right, and make sure you press those seams open like how we've been practicing. So next you want to take pattern piece number 11, and this is the one with the curvature on there. And again, you want to match up those notches. This pattern piece has the double notches, and this edge also has the double notches. So make sure that you match up those notches appropriately. Okay, so we're going to take pattern piece number 13, which are our straps, and we're going to fold these lengthwise at 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, and then we're going to turn them right side out. So once you're done with your straps, go ahead and baste the raw edges, and then we're going to take our bodice, our main bodice piece, and we are going to pin the angled edge of the strap to the right side of the bodice. Make sure you're matching up those dots, if you guys can see them on my bodice. And we're going to take this to our sewing machine and sew those down. All right, so I'm back from the sewing machine. I am going to trim these down just a little bit now that they are sewn in place. And I'm just going to snip some thread here as well. All right. And then what we're going to do is we're going to work on our lining pieces. So you want to make sure that you actually sew your lining exactly how you do your outer piece here, your fashion fabric, I should say. And you're going to put these right sides together, matching up your dots and all of your notches. And we are going to pin this across the top over the entire thing. And then we'll take this to our sewing machine and sew it at 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. So I pinned all the way to like just about this, like before it starts to curve. And I also made sure that my straps were tucked in. And I'm going to do the other side now. All right, so now that I have finished pinning my bodice to my lining, I do want to stress the point. So these two dots right here, we're actually not going to be sewing between those two dots on both areas of the bodice. We're actually going to sew and stop, and then sew again and stop. So this is where you'll be adding in the other side of the straps. So again, make sure that you guys are leaving that space open as you're sewing your lining piece and your outer pieces. So I'm actually going to lower my needle exactly where I want it to start. And I'm also going to remove the pin as well. And then I'm going to put my presser foot down and start to sew. And since I've stopped at that dot, I'm going to pick up on the dot just beside it, lowering my needle and beginning to sew again. So now that I went to the end of the other side, I'm going to pick this up and continue sewing on the other side. Following those same steps, lowering my needle right where that dot is, and sewing at 5/8. So now we're going to trim our seam allowance, and feel free to also add in any sort of additional notches and whatnot that you feel like you may want to have, especially around the valleys and the peaks where things can kind of get a little stubborn as you're trying to sew and turn it around. I'm not going to actually trim this seam allowance right here just yet because we got to put our straps there. So I am going to be careful around those areas. But especially around this front V, I am going to trim this down and clip in some notches. And then I'm going to just kind of ease in onto the other side of that peak and go all the way down the slope. I apologize for the skiing analogies tonight. Okay. All right. So now we are going to turn this right side out, and we're actually going to press the seam allowance towards the lining part, which would be the white for me, and you're going to understitch this all the way around. Again, try to avoid that space where you know that you'll need to put your straps in. So go ahead and move your straps out of the way because you don't want to understitch those on accident. So move those out of the way, excuse me, and go ahead and stitch on the lining side. You should have pressed the seam allowance to the lining side. That way you can get that perfect understitch. Okay, so now we're going to work on connecting our straps. So our straps are actually crisscross. So I've already done one so I don't confuse myself. And the strap is kind of long, and that's because it is one crisscross and then it goes all the way down the back. So this is kind of about trusting the process. Okay, so you kind of want to guide your hand across it so that way you can avoid any sort of twisting. And then remember those two dots, it's going to slip right into that spot right there. And you can use a safety pin to catch it on the other side or just kind of pull it through if you have nails. And once it is secure, put a pin in it and then back stitch back and forth right quick and then trim the excess. So at this point your strap should be attached, but your back is going to stay open. And now we're going to move on to our skirt pieces. All right, so now we're going to work on our skirt pieces. This is pattern piece number 5, which is your skirt front. And you should have some notches down along this skirt piece to help guide you. And what we're going to do is we're going to take pattern piece number 6 and we are going to pin that on each side. So one on this side, one on the other side. Next, you're going to take pattern piece number 7, which is your skirt back, and you are going to literally just start pinning from the single notch on all the way down. And this is going to be where we insert our zipper later on. So that's why you're going to start sewing from the notch all the way to the bottom hem. So now that we have our center back seam closed up, we are going to take pattern piece number 8 and we are going to connect them on each side of this skirt piece. So we're going to be matching up the double notches that are on these edges here to pin this in place. All right, so this is our back skirt piece, which is pattern pieces 7 and 8, and they're all sewn together. And as you can see, our zipper opening is right here. We're going to take that front skirt piece, those are pattern pieces 5 and 6, and we are going to lay them right sides together, right on top of the back skirt piece. And we're going to sew these, pin and sew these right sides together at the seams. Okay, so those same steps that we made for our skirt outer pieces, you want to make for your lining pieces as well. So go ahead and do that. So now we're going to connect our skirt piece to our bodice, and make sure that you open up the lining away from the actual outer piece and right sides together, starting at the edge where the zipper is, or yeah, where your zipper is supposed to go, excuse me, and at the edge of the bodice. Go ahead and start pinning, matching up your notches like you see here, and matching up your seams as well. All right, so now that this is all pinned together, go ahead and take this to your machine and sew it at 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, so now we're gonna work on our invisible zipper. I have some rules or some best practices for invisible zippers. 1, I always make sure that the zipper actually works. 2, I gently press the tape of the zipper to avoid any sort of wrinkles or anything, and you'd be surprised just how much that actually helps with inserting the invisible zipper. Now, there is a tutorial on this channel for how to insert an invisible zipper, and you are free to look at that as well. But for the sake of this tutorial, the tape actually starts here at this red dot. and I'm going to pin my zipper all the way down to the opening. And the seam allowance for the invisible zipper is 5/8. So once you have this pin, you are going to take this to your sewing machine and sew it using an invisible zipper foot. I always recommend doing a basting stitch first down this side and doing a basting stitch down on the other side and checking the placement and making sure that it can actually zip up before doing a permanent stitch all the way down the zipper. All right, so I have done the basting stitch and it zips up, the seam lines match up on the back. So now I'm actually gonna go ahead and do my real stitches. And then do the same thing on the other side. Okay, so now that we have our zipper inserted, go ahead and move your lining out of the way. And we're actually going to attach our skirt lining. So make sure that you're doing right sides together on your lining pieces and that your dress is inside the skirt lining with right sides together. So matching up your notches and your seams, just like we did with the first time that we did this, go ahead and line all of this up. Now that this is all pinned together, go ahead and take this to your sewing machine and sew it at 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. All right, so once you have attached your skirt lining to your bodice lining, you should have pressed those seams open, and now we are actually going to close up our zipper. So this is technically the zipper piece, the back part, and that curvature is, you know, part of the dress and whatnot. So matching up the seams and the edges here, we're going to sew this up at our sewing machine. And you'll probably have to switch back to your zipper foot for this because it could be a little bit more narrow getting through that zipper, because you don't want to actually sew through those teeth. You want to make sure that you miss those teeth altogether. So instead of using your invisible zipper foot, I recommend using your regular zipper foot for this part. All right, let's go ahead and sew this up. Once that step is complete, go ahead and finish your hem and you're all set. All right, you guys, thank you so much for watching that video. Now, if you like that video, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button. And if you're not following me already, you can follow me at Raven Maureen on Instagram, TikTok, and Threads. See you next time.